The old town of Ashenbury had a dark secret buried beneath its picturesque cottages and quiet streets. To the casual visitor, it was a quaint, forgotten village surrounded by dense forests, the kind that hadn't changed in centuries. But the locals, especially the elders, knew better. They had seen things, terrible things passed down from generation to generation. Tales that spoke of an ancient demon, Molock, who demanded a horrifying tribute. The legend said that every 50 years Moloch would rise from his ancient hidden lair deep within the forest to claim what was rightfully his, the pure souls of the town's children. In return, Ashenbury would be spared from plagues, famine, and ruin. It was a pact as old as the town itself, one that ensured its survival, but at an unbearable cost. As autumn settled in and the nights grew long, whispers of Moloch began to stir again. The year was 2024, the 50th year since the last harvest. The people of Ashenbury, those who were aware of the pact, knew what was coming. They hoped, prayed even, that perhaps this time the demon would be satisfied without a sacrifice. But deep down, they knew better. There was always a price. It was mid-October when strange things started to happen. A thick fog rolled into Ashenbury, refusing to lift even during the brightest part of the day. The once vibrant forests turned gray and brittle, their branches like skeletal hands clawing at the sky. Animals vanished without a trace, and an unnatural stillness settled over the town. At night, the air would grow so cold that even the hearth fires seemed to shiver. Children began to fall ill, a sickness no doctor could explain. It started with nightmares. Visions of a dark figure standing at the edge of the forest, watching, waiting. Then came the sleepwalking. Parents woke to find their children standing at windows or doors, eyes wide open yet unseeing, murmuring the same phrase over and over. He comes for us. Moloch comes for us. Desperate for answers, the townspeople called a meeting in the old church at the heart of Ashenbury. It was a place that had stood through centuries of trials, its stone walls bearing witness to countless pleas for mercy. This night, the church was filled with anxious murmurs, eyes darting nervously to the stained glass windows, as though expecting the demon himself to burst through at any moment. Mayor Alden, a stoic man in his 50s, took to the pulpit. His face was ashen, his eyes reflecting the weight of knowledge he wished he didn't possess. "We all know why we're here," he began, his voice quivering despite his effort to remain composed. "The time has come again. Moloch demands his sacrifice." Gasps and cries filled the room. Some wept openly, clutching their children to their chests. Others stared ahead in stunned silence. The mayor raised his hands, trying to calm the crowd. "We have no choice," he continued. "It's our tradition, our curse. If we do not offer what he asks, Ashenbury will face his wrath." A voice called out from the back. It was Father Thomas, the town's priest, his face pale as death. "This is madness," he declared. "We cannot condone the murder of our children to feed some ancient evil, but we must," came the voice of old Mrs. Hargrove, her frail form shaking as she spoke. "I remember the last harvest 50 years ago. Those who defied Moloch suffered. The crops died, the rivers dried up. Plague swept through the town, sparing no one. We cannot let that happen again." Silence fell over the crowd, the weight of their decision settling like a shroud over their hearts. It was true, the tales of the previous harvests were well known. Ashenbury owed its prosperity to the dark bargain made with the demon. No one spoke for several moments, each person lost in the nightmare of what was to come. Finally, Mayor Alden spoke again. "We will draw lots," he said, his voice hollow. "One child, one sacrifice. It is the only way." The days that followed were a blur of dread and sorrow. The townsfolk moved like shadows, barely speaking, avoiding each other's eyes. And as the fog thickened around Ashenbury, the children's condition worsened. They no longer merely sleepwalked, but began to speak in voices not their own, guttural and ancient, words twisted in ways that no human tongue should form. It was the night of October 31st when the lots were drawn. The townspeople gathered in the church, the air heavy with tension. One by one, the children stepped forward, their eyes glassy and far away. Mayor Alden held a small, rusted box containing slips of paper, each one marked with a name. As each child reached into the box, parents held their breath, praying it wouldn't be their own. Finally, it was Lucy Harper's turn. She was only 9 years old, her long black hair framing a face too innocent to bear the burden of what was happening. With a shaking hand, she drew a slip of paper from the box and handed it to the mayor. Mayor Alden's face went white as he unfolded the paper. His voice was barely a whisper. "Lucy Harper," he said, his words echoing through the church like a death knell. A wail erupted from Lucy's mother as she collapsed to the floor, clutching her daughter. "No, not my Lucy. Please, not my little girl." But there was no mercy in this ritual, no turning back. The townsfolk, though heartsick, knew what had to be done. 2 men stepped forward to take Lucy away, their faces stony masks hiding the agony within. They led her to the forest's edge, to a place known as the Hollow, a circle of ancient stones where it was said Moloch himself once walked the earth. The Hollow was a place no one dared to go, not even during the day. But tonight, it was unavoidable. Torches flickered in the darkness as the procession moved forward, Lucy walking silently between the 2 men, her head bowed. At the center of the hollow, they laid her on a stone slab, cold and rough against her small form. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a moment she seemed to return to herself. "Mommy?" she called out weakly, her voice breaking through the eerie stillness. "I'm scared." Her mother, held back by the townspeople, wept bitterly, unable to answer. The ritual had begun. Father Thomas, though he opposed the sacrifice, was forced to preside over the grim proceedings. He stepped forward, raising his hands toward the sky. "Moloch, ancient spirit of darkness," he intoned, his voice cracking. "We offer this tribute, as has been done for centuries. Spare us your wrath. Accept our sacrifice." For a moment, nothing happened. Then a low rumble shook the ground, a vibration that seemed to come from the earth's very core. The torches flickered wildly, casting grotesque shadows against the trees. A thick black mist began to rise from the ground, swirling around the stone slab, enveloping Lucy in its cold embrace. And then they heard it, a voice deep and resonant, echoing through the hollow. It was the voice of Moloch, speaking in a language older than time itself. "I accept." The mist coalesced into a figure, towering and grotesque, its form barely human. It had eyes like burning coals, piercing the darkness with a malevolent gaze. Its mouth stretched into a hideous grin, rows of jagged teeth glistening in the torchlight. "The child is mine!" Moloch hissed, his voice like the grinding of stone. Lucy screamed, a sound that tore through the hearts of everyone present. She writhed on the slab, her body arching as if pulled by invisible hands. Her eyes went black, her mouth opening wide in a silent scream. The mist flowed into her, filling her like a vessel, her small body convulsing violently. "No!" Father Thomas shouted, rushing forward. "I won't let you take her!" But as he neared the stone, Moloch raised a hand, and an unseen force flung the priest backward, sending him crashing into the trees. The demon's laughter echoed through the forest, a chilling sound that would haunt the nightmares of everyone who heard it. Lucy's body went still, her eyes closing. For a moment, it seemed as though it was over. The mist dissipated, leaving only the heavy silence of the forest. But then, Lucy sat up. Her eyes snapped open, and what stared back at the townspeople was not the innocent gaze of a 9-year-old girl. They were black, endless pits of darkness, filled with malice and hunger. She smiled, a smile too wide, too sharp. "The harvest is not over," she said, her voice a distorted echo of her own. "Moloch has tasted blood, and now he will feast." With a sudden, inhuman speed, she leapt from the slab, landing among the townspeople. Screams filled the air as they scattered in every direction. But it was too late. One by one, they fell, their life force drained as the possessed Lucy touched them. The fog thickened, swirling around the hollow, swallowing their cries into the darkness. By dawn, the forest was silent. The mist had cleared, leaving the hollow empty except for the stone slab and a single figure standing beside it. Lucy, or what had once been Lucy, stared out into the trees, her black eyes unblinking. She turned, walking back toward the town, a faint, twisted smile on her lips. The townspeople who survived that night spoke little of what had happened. They knew now that the bargain was broken, that Moloch would not be sated with a single sacrifice. They had unleashed a darkness that would haunt Ashenbury for generations to come. And as the town fell into a new era of fear, the children still spoke in their sleep, whispering words that chilled the blood of any who listened. Moloch has come, and he is always hungry. From that year on, Ashenbury became known as the Town of Shadows, where the mist never fully lifted, and the laughter of children was forever tinged with a hint of something darker. Because in the end, Moloch was not just a demon demanding tribute, he was a curse that turned innocence into horror, a hunger that could never be satisfied.